Right, let's talk a little bit about Singapore, and we'll try to keep it a little bit. What do we know about Singapore? Socialism, capitalism, market economy. And I'd say just unmute your mics and tell me, or Debbie, you can help me out. And if we're typing things in the chat, you can tell me what they're saying.
Free
What
market,
would you call Singapore?
absolute free market.
Okay, anybody else? Oh, maybe we don't know a
With,
lot about Singapore.
with a hint of authoritarianism.
A hint of authoritarianism, all right?
Free to
Anybody else?
choose.
Free to choose. Okay.
Don't
Well,
spit on the sidewalks.
yeah. Don't spit on the sidewalks. I'm not sure if the free to choose fully fits. They are an interesting mix of things. So let's change this slide and say, tell me now, what do you know about Singapore? We know it's a very modern city in that picture in the middle. Do we actually know where it is? You can see it on that map over on the left part of your screen in red, where Singapore sits. And you can see on that right that it is an island of islands. The main part of Singapore is on that larger island, but there are literally thousands of mostly uninhabited smaller islands that make up the total country of, or it's not country, city state of Singapore. So what do we know about Singapore again? Let's throw some things up there that I didn't know, or maybe I knew some, that float around that fit Singapore. It's an island. We already hit that. It is the world's busiest port. Now, you think about that for a minute, and you think about places like Hong Kong, New York, Los Angeles. It is the world's busiest port. It is a city state. There are two other city states in the world. Anybody know what they are?
Vatican City,
Vatican City is one of them. Monaco is the other.
Monaco, yeah.
Okay. The possession or sale of gum is a crime, as is spitting on the sidewalk, as is not flushing a public toilet, as is not walking around in your house naked with the curtains open. Those are all laws in Singapore. The state owns 90% of the country's land. That doesn't sound free market. Economically, it is ranked as the most free country in the world by that Fraser Institute index. It was known as one of the Asian tigers. Can anybody name the other Asian tigers? So this is a term we dropped on a handful of countries from that part of the country because of their world, because of their rapid growth. South Korea was in there.
Taiwan, Hong
Taiwan
Kong,
is, what was the last
Hong
one?
Kong.
Hong Kong, right? And Singapore. 80% of Singapore's population live in housing constructed and owned by the government. That's an interesting one. It's an interesting combination. The government actually builds the housing. Notice, remember up above, it said they own 90% of the country's land. And then they lease the housing back to the individuals. And it is a lease fashion so that I can sell it. I can improve the property. So it acts very much as a deed, but it is a lease. How's that working out for them? Hard to say, because those leases are 100 years and they only instituted the program, I think, in 1960 something, the early 60s. So nobody's reached the end of their lease yet. state is linked to or owns portions of 20 of the largest companies and has holdings in a number of real estate investment trusts. Ooh, that doesn't sound very free market either. And then I stuck down there in blue the importance of Prime Minister Yu. And we'll see Prime Minister Yu come in here in just a minute as we look at a history. So what do we know about Singapore? I didn't put any X's anywhere because I'm not ready to say whether it's capitalism or socialism. Brief history. Port City back into the 1500s, always been one of the busiest ports in the world. The East India Company, this Stanford Raffles, kind of discovered it back in 1819, established a trading post for Great Britain. In 26, they joined an alliance with called the Straits Settlements. But then in 1867, they became a British Crown colony under the direct rule of the British government, which tells us a lot about the institutions that were put in place, because we know a lot about the institutions of the British government. Private property, basically free elections, basically market-based, etc. By 1870, population's 100,000 with high levels of commerce and commercial construction. In 1963, they joined other British colonies to form the Federation of Malaysia. But they left the Malaysian Federation 2 years later, and depending on which history you read or which author, most of them say they were kicked out of the Federation in 1965 to form and then form their own independent state. Can anybody tell me about the sort of ethnic heritage of Singapore? Malaysian, Chinese, what are they?
Largely Chinese, but multi-ethnic.
Very multi-ethnic. I don't think a true Singaporean would like you to say they're mostly Chinese. It's actually there's not a lot of love lost between true Chinese and someone from Singapore. They're kind of their own little.
I didn't say true Chinese, I said ethnic Chinese.
Oh, ethnic Chinese. Excuse me. Okay.
There's a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they were kicked out of that federation because they couldn't get along with the other states. And so at that point, as they became an independent state, this Lee Kuan Yew, it's the first prime minister, and he leads their economic transformation for 25 years. He's an incredibly important person in their history. Singapore's known for, looked to because of the rapid economic growth since 1965, which is when you stepped into the role as prime minister. So let's look quickly, and I'm trying to keep us on track here, at some of that economic growth. Per person income, 1960 to 2020, you can see over there in the 1960 down there, that little bit of a bar, red bar on the far left is Singapore. And by 2020, they are at the literal top of the heap. Incredible economic growth through those years, hence being part of the Asian tigers. Here's our man Yu. And this quote will tell you a lot about him and his, and therefore the country's emphasis on individual self-reliance. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it for us. Watching the ever-increasing costs of the welfare state in Britain and Sweden, we decided to avoid this debilitating system. Welfare undermines self-reliance. People did not have to work for their family's well-being. The handout became a way of life. The downward spiral was restless as motivation, relentless as motivation, and productivity went down. They became dependent on the state for their basic needs. So he is really big on self-reliance, and does not like the idea of a welfare state. Yet we many times think about Singapore as being a market-based welfare state. And we do that because one of the things they established early on was a central provident fund. The central provident fund, I guess you could say it's similar to, I would not say equivalent to our Social Security, in that it is compulsory, requires both workers and employers to contribute to a personal savings account. There is some flexibility in that savings account about where individuals can direct their money for investment and hopefully growth. Not a lot of choice, but a few choices. And that savings account, unlike Social Security, can be used for housing, education, healthcare, unemployment assistance, and retirement income. So the idea here is high and compulsory taxation that leaves you open for choice on the use of that funding. It started as a pension fund originally, but now even allows bequests from it. So it doesn't even roll back to the government when I die. I can leave it to my children. I can leave it to my sister, whatever. Some individuals limit spending on health and retirement to be able to leave the bequest. And that's starting to be a little bit of a problem for them, because the idea was that there would be enough there that even in your self-reliance, you could afford the health care and the retirement that you needed. But some people are making the choice to live less healthy and in not as good a retirement, so they can leave something for their heirs. Not unlike some people in the United States. As I said, there's some latitude on how the funds are invested. This last one is pretty interesting. That combined contribution between the worker and the employer is as high as 30% of wages. The contribution of the employee or worker is a sliding kind of scale that has to do with your age. So at different ages, you are required to contribute different percentage, with at the very young being the smaller percentages. This just explains it in another form. This is again from the Fraser materials. This is this Central Provident Fund is the back for, excuse me, it is the primary way that they provide for government services. And so one of the things that happens in here, when you see them at the top of the most economically free, part of that rating is what percentage of the total economy is represented by government spending. Well, if the employer and the worker have contributed to the Central Provident Fund, that's not considered government spending. That's considered private spending. So therefore, where we are using tax dollars, government money, to provide some of these benefits, they're using what qualifies as private money, hence the low percentage of government funding relative to the rest of the economy. So we can't always just look at the numbers that are produced and compare them straight across. We need to dig a little deeper. Okay, so government and industrial and economic policy, they inherited British institutions, as I said. Their history is pragmatic goals, and they are very clear about that. They do not see their country or their economy based on any sort of philosophical sort of position. They are pragmatic in providing for the people through a growing economy uh, that strives for increased productivity, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Their emphasis is on open markets. As I said, busiest port in the world, and they have one of the lowest corruption ratings in the world. They also spend a fair amount of government money to try to attract businesses to Singapore. They want to bring businesses to Singapore in the form of, high tech right now for sure, but also manufacturing. They, as I said, have always been a busy trader. That has exploded since the early 90s. You can see, and for the life of me, I don't know why they put this graph reading from the left to the right instead of the right to the left. But if you look over on the right, it's Singapore export volume in 1990s, right at 100,000. It's all the way up to 567. Excuse me, that's not thousands, millions, I believe it is. Yeah, in millions of nominal US dollars by 2020. And you can go right down the list and you can see the growth in their trade and their business. They continue to be extremely successful with their economic growth. Government policies in general, government is linked to what they have named a government linked corporations funding. And this is where this ownership of 20 of the largest businesses takes place. They do not take, and very seldom will they take a majority ownership in a business, but to attract a business to Singapore or to help a business expand, invest in additional capital equipment, innovation, etc. They will take an equity position in that business, provide government funding to either attract them to Singapore or help them expand while they're there. So they are very much a player in the economy as the government, but not government owned in the sense of running the whole business. Their workfare program, it incentivizes employment assistance, training, and education. Basically, it is hard to be unemployed in Singapore because if you're unemployed, you are eligible for this workfare program, which immediately pays you to be working essentially and to be in some sort of training or education program. So you might be paid by the government to go to college or go to secondary school. You might be paid to go to some sort of training school, but they want to incentivize employment assistance rather than simply handing you a check. Home ownership is important. That's why they came up with this, we'll build them and lease them to you. You can consider them that you own them, but in the end, the government really owns them. This last quote is pretty telling by the current prime minister. And it speaks to something I heard a few of you looking at in the last exercise, and that was the income inequality or the Gini coefficient. And it harkens all the way back to sort of the equity and redistribution of socialism. And probably by now you've read what it says. If I can get another 10 billionaires to move to Singapore, my Gini coefficient will get worse because there's more rich people vis-a-vis the middle class, but the Singaporeans will be better off because these people will bring businesses, bring in opportunities, open doors, and create new jobs. And I think that is the attitude with which we must approach this problem. So we're not going to fix income inequality with any sort of redistribution. We're going to fix it with economic growth. Very different approach. Singapore's per person GDP grew dramatically by 1993, and you can see their per capita GDP has surpassed the average of the economically developed countries of the world. Here's their per capita GDP in terms of growth and looking at the different countries. And if you look at Singapore, it was quite a ways back there in 1961, and now essentially it leads all others. The pace of the growth in Singapore has been amazing. And I think some people are waiting for it to implode on itself. It has not. It has marched right on. Investment's been critical to their economic success. Some of that investment has been foreign investment. And as I said earlier, some of that investment has been government investment. But government investment as an equity partner in those investments. They now enjoy a longer life expectancy than that of average countries. Has consistently higher employment rates than the wealthy countries of the world. So if you want a job and you want to live a long time, Singapore might be a good place to be, but you can't chew gum. Consumer price index. In all of this rapid growth, they have been able to keep inflation well under control. And again, relative to the rest of the countries listed there, it's instructive to just skip across to the United States and notice that their inflation is lower than that in the US every single year down there, even when the whole world was suffering from the inflationary shocks in the 70s and into the early 80s. They've consistently had lower unemployment rates. Government spending as a share of the economy consistently lower than the Western countries. That was the case in 1990. It remains the case today. So even though they are continuing to provide lots of benefits, their government spending as a share of the economy has not. And again, you have to look at that and dig a little deeper in terms of, yeah, but what's getting counted as a share of the government spending? Does that or does that not include things like that Provident Fund? Taxation in Singapore, relatively low top personal income tax rate. You can see it in that bar across the top and the red 22%. And that's, that's low when you look compared to the US I thought it was interesting on this graph, they split California out by itself. But in the US at 37%, Canada, it's lower, Canada up there at 53, United Kingdom at 45. And then we go down on the other scale and see where that kicks in. Remember in Sweden, that highest tax rate kicked in at, what was it, $67,000 or $61,000. Here, it's well over 200,000 before you're paying that top rate. So I'd have to say relatively low tax rates for the Singaporean citizen. Education, they consistently rank very high on international education measures, but as a percentage of their GDP, lower spending on it. Again, part of that because what's in that Provident Fund? Because some of those are individual choices where they are spending money on education, and that wouldn't be included in this chart. So what do they really spend on education? A little hard to say. In 2021, Singapore became the most economically free country in the world, according to the Fraser Institute. But what about the other side of that? The Fraser Institute does not look significantly hard. I won't say it doesn't look at all at things like you got to flush the public toilets, right? But there is a human freedom index of the world that does look and rank those things. This gives you a sense of where those countries are ranked, their economic freedom score, their personal freedom score, and their human freedom score. And you can see that Singapore is ranked 44th, first in the world when it comes to their economic freedom, according to Fraser, 44th on the Human Freedom Index. So, where does Singapore belong? Is it socialism? Is it capitalism? Is it control? Is it freedom? I'm going to leave that one for you to answer. It's a different look at another country. It is a look at a country that has been able to provide high standards of living, high income, low unemployment, lots of social services when it comes to education, to health care, to retirement, etc. They found a way to do that. But I think there has been a cost when it comes to the control. And so it's another way to look at this question of what kind of system do we have and what kind of system do we want to live under? Here's one that I would not put as socialism, though once in a while you find Singapore on that scale. Free markets, free markets with lots of government support. I guess I will use that term. So that's a quick look at Singapore. I would encourage you to go look at the Fraser site and explore the writings on these countries we've looked at, along with they have Estonia and Denmark, and I can't remember, there's one more I'm leaving out. And look at their analysis. Hopefully this is giving you a little bit more of a handle to be able to talk with your students about, well, just what is socialism and what does that look like? And what are the opportunity costs involved in socialism, capitalism, control, and freedom? So thanks for listening to me. Debbie, it's back to you.
I want to start, well, now my bar is in the way, by showing you the Realities of Socialism website that the Fraser Institute has. The Fraser Institute is a think tank based out of Canada. And remember, I told you teaching resources was just part of what they wanted to provide. So you'll notice each of the countries we talked about, or we talked about today, including others. So Poland, Sweden, Denmark, Estonia, and Singapore. Each one of those has a set of resources available. And when you click on that, here's Poland, for example, you can read the publication and that you can explore it. Literally, they created a book for each one of these countries. I have one here. Which one is this? Yeah, this is the one for Poland. So if you can, I'll put it, oh, I'm not, there we go. You can see this book for Poland, and it's quite large. Lots of information. Ken did a really good job of simplifying that and putting it into pieces that would be useful for the classroom. So he really provided kind of a summary that could be used for you as the teacher as you're preparing to teach this information, or even assigned as a student reading. But if you want to read more, the entire book is available here on the website. You can also see they have all of these infographics. So a lot of these types of infographics can use in his slides. This is where you can see where they came from. They also have videos. So here's several videos for about life expectancy in Poland, economic freedom, average incomes, for example. Let me go back, and you'll see they also have podcasts. So here's a podcast about the realities of socialism, Polish life under socialism. And this is a 43-minute podcast. Here's one on Polish life after socialism. And that's a 47-minute podcast. And they have similar resources for the other countries as well. So Singapore, the one we just talked about. You can watch the publication, read the publication, watch the video, and check out the podcasts that they have there as well. So these are resources in addition to the resources we're going to share. Let's get back here. All right, I'll make this a little bigger for you. Go ahead and take a screenshot of this QR code. Actually, I'm going to copy. I'm also going to put the link right into the chat. So if you want to open it up on your computer, you'll have it there as well. Let's see, meeting group chat. You can go ahead and click on that link. The other link you see here on the bottom takes you to that Realities of Socialism website that I was just showing you. I'm realizing now I forgot to give you your break after Ken was done. That's okay. We'll just finish a little bit early. I don't think anybody will mind, right? Okay, so when you click on that link or follow the QR code, it takes you to this Google folder that has the curriculum divided into 3 parts. Part 1, lessons and slides include, you'll see in the documents, the Word documents, you'll see lesson 1, socialism defined. And there's the activity 1, which was the survey that we did this morning. And these are the Word documents, the lesson plans that explain, how to use the material. There's another activity called Let's Make It Fair. This is a very fun activity. You'll notice there's corresponding slides. So you'll see Ken's socialism, lesson 2, Poland is right there. I'm going to go ahead and click on activity 2, which is Let's Make It Fair, just so you can see a little preview of this activity. This is an activity where it's a simulation where they live in an economy that is a too-good economy where they can produce either stickers or candy. And like any economy, they face scarcity. And so as a class, it's a socialist economy, and they get to decide. It's their economy. It belongs to them. And so as a group, they get to decide how many stickers and how many pieces of candy do they want to produce. And these are their possibilities that they choose from. Notice I have some hidden slides here for different size classes that are explained in the lesson plan. You use these fun little bingo chips, which you can actually find on Amazon, very inexpensive. You also can use other less expensive things like buy a bag of hard black beans or something and use those as the currency. But we call the currency equalities, and everybody gets an equal amount because we are, as an economy that cares about equality. And so everybody gets 10 equalities to begin. And then as the students start discussing how they should allocate, how they should allocate the resources, should we make more candy, more stickers? You have a couple store owners that will manage, the selling of the stickers. What the students find out is in time given, they have a really hard time agreeing on a solution for how many stickers and how many pieces of candy should be produced. So you ask them if they, if they have any ideas about how they could do this more efficiently. You can prompt them if necessary, but it usually helps for them to pick some representatives who will make that decision for them. And so you ask them to nominate some representatives. And so these production managers, then usually 3 students maybe that you pick, make a decision for the whole class about how many will be produced. And they also have to decide what the price will be. And then the stores count out that many number of stickers, that many pieces of candy. You explain the prices to everybody and you open the stores. And what ends up happening is there's not enough. Maybe more people wanted candy than was available, or more people wanted stickers. Something ran out. It just wasn't perfect. So you let them try again. They try again with all that new information. And what they discover is it's still hard to improve the outcome. That having people, even though they're the ones deciding and they're the ones that are in control, they can't overcome the knowledge problem. There's no way that these production managers can know all the right answers. And so that's the point of the activity, is that even when there's not state coercion, there's still an information problem. And equitable or fair allocations are hard to define, let alone achieve. And there's always going to be positions of power. There are people that were closer to the stores, maybe the production managers themselves that maybe were a little more privileged in the activity than other people. And these are hard things for socialist economies to overcome, even though they have, good goals and may not have that element of coercion. So that's activity 2. The lessons in this one are about Poland and defining socialism. And then there's one on the pathologies of privilege. When you go into part 2, there's lessons on Denmark and Sweden. And the activities are it's innovation activity that we did today called It's Not Rocket Science. And there's another activity called The More the Merrier. This is a fun activity where the students, you can't really do this one virtually, but in class, you have a few students who are producing bracelets with paper clips, and then other students who are producing currency. They work for the mint, basically, in the economy. And then that becomes their pay. And in between rounds, they try to buy all the producers, so the people that were producing currency are now consumers, and they try to buy bracelets. In the beginning, because there's only a few producers of bracelets, you can imagine the prices are very high and not very many people get bracelets. And over successive rounds, you give additional people the opportunity to buy a business license and become a producer. And so as more and more producers enter the market, you can imagine what happens to the price. The prices come down and more people get bracelets. And so that shows the importance of competition in the marketplace. It just requires a lot of paper clips, which you can probably get from your school, supply room. And the good thing is you can use them over and over again. So that's another activity in this set, along with the lessons about Sweden and Denmark. I'm going to open up Sweden just so you can see an example. So the lesson includes some key terms, a link to slides that you can use to teach it that are also in the folder, link to national content standards, and then you have this background information that can curated from the big book on Sweden to a more usable piece that you could share with students, or you could just read for background information for you, the instructor. So a more bite-sized piece that kind of tells you the highlights of Sweden in that case. And then if we go back to part 3, this one features Estonia and Singapore. And the activities here are activity 5, which is called the shortage economy. So many of you, I'm sure, have run a market economy in your classroom. This is a version of a market economy where the item being produced are chickens, and it's designed to create a shortage very quickly. There's not enough chickens around. So let me just open the slides for the shortage economy. Oh, activity 5, here we go. Okay, so there are cards like this. The teacher instructions explain how many to make of each card, the prices. These are all the buyers of chickens get cards each time that tell them what they value they place on a chicken, what they're willing to pay for a chicken. And the sellers get us an inventory of chickens. They get a roll card that tells them their cost per chicken. And everybody gets these white handouts in the back where they keep track of their transactions. And as they experience a shortage, what starts happening in the classroom is people start resorting to the black market to get chickens. Students start buying chickens from other students who aren't authorized chicken producers. The chicken sellers start selling more chickens than they're allowed to sell. Maybe inventory that they have for future rounds, they start selling in this round. And you don't want to squash these, activities that you see, because the whole point of this is to explain that when markets can't provide, when they're restricted and they can't provide those things that they would normally provide, people resort to what we call black markets or gray markets, kind of basically illegal, unauthorized markets to fulfill their needs. And it's kind of a natural occurrence that happens when you see things like shortages. So that's the shortage economy. And then the activity that we did, Will the Real Socialism Please Stand Up, is in here as well. Any questions about any of these specific lessons or activities? I will say the activity called Let's Make It Fair with the equalities and the stickers and candy, definitely check that one out, as well as the shortage economy. They're up out of your seat, interactive things that you can do in the classroom. While they don't lend themselves well to this virtual setting, I don't want you to miss out on those. So definitely check out those lessons. Anything you want to add, Ken? I'll take that as a no, Ken's okay. Come back here to our.
Yeah, I'm okay. I think you covered it.
Okay, good. All right. So anybody, if you need that link, I'll put it one more time in the chat. Thank you so much for giving up your Saturday. I hope you got something useful that you can use in the classroom. And I especially hope that we get to see you again at a future workshop, maybe even an in-person workshop sometime, or one of our residential programs over the summer. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here and giving us your Saturday.